Black Mesa Source is the latest in the line of almost vaporware to finally hit the streets after nearly a decade of development. And while it's not 100% finished yet, it succeeds where other examples like Duke Nukem Forever and Chinese Democracy failed. It totally lives up to the hype. It's not perfect, but for an amateur effort, you'd be hard-pressed to find a more solid product. For those not in the know, Black Mesa is a reimagining of the first Half-Life, released in 1998 on the Source engine. Starting after the release of Half-Life 2, the Black Mesa development team decided to tackle a modern remake of the first Half-Life after it was disappointingly ported to the Source engine by Valve Software as, more or less, an example to modders on how flexible the game engine can be. What came about from their labor is a mostly solid, visually impressive, and true to the original remake. Half-Life purists will be fairly pleased with this mod. As someone who has played the original Half-Life an innumerable amount of times, I have an almost photographic memory of the 1998 original. Still, while I'll compare many aspects of Black Mesa to the original, I also did try and pick out the mod's own merits and shortcomings not related to Half-Life. With that said, I guess I should begin. Black Mesa tells the story of 27-year-old theoretical physicist Gordon Freeman. As the game begins, Gordon is running late for work, and the player is treated to a lengthy tram ride through the titular Black Mesa research facility on the way to Sector C, the Anomalous Materials Labs. For the modern caffeine-fueled Call of Duty player, this slow pacing will likely prove jarring, but it's a design choice that slowly introduces you to the facility and sets a good tone for the rest of the game. There are many areas of the game where the player is encouraged to slow down and either admire the scenery or to listen to conversations. The presentation here is very faithful to the original, and it's mostly made better by the high level of detail present throughout the game. Your eyes will be begging your hands and fingers to stop so you can take in all of the scenery. The graphics in Black Mesa top just about everything else on the Source engine, Valve Productions included. While you'll occasionally find the low-resolution texture, like on the Revolver, the number of original art assets give the environment a very real, lived-in feeling, and help immerse the player. This also presents some problems in the gameplay department, as level design can also be cluttered to the effect of obstructing players' movement during combat and jumping puzzles. Speaking of which, the jumping puzzles in this game are straight out of 1998, and they haven't improved at all. Gordon feels like he jumps with lead shoes on, and most of the platforming sections require you to use the duck jump, something which all but the most die-hard Half-Life fans will have trouble getting used to. Most of my frustrations during gameplay came from the platforming sections, and I can't help but think that they underwent the least amount of playtesting. After 8 years of development, this is really unacceptable. The rest of Gordon's movement is a throwback to the old era of shooters, games like Doom and Duke Nukem where the player could run faster than a freight train, practically run circles around moving bullets and deadly projectiles. This lends itself to a fast and furious style of gameplay that's a welcome refreshment from modern combat games where you play and feel like a soldier lugging around 50 pounds of gear on his back. Enemies will ambush you with random teleportations, requiring you to think fast, dodge, and counterattack to succeed, as Gordon's health and armor do not regenerate. To even the odds for Gordon, the game features an arsenal of weapons, all of them from the original game. While they have all undergone minor tweaks and balances, I felt like most of them stayed true to the original weapons. Furthermore, almost all of the weapons feel satisfying to use. They pack punch, have crispy and punchy sound effects, and slick models and animations to lead them credence. I found myself using weapons that I hadn't in the original game, like the Hive Hand and the Tau Cannon, but I was often disappointed at the explosives. The grenades really suffer from having no crosshair and are difficult to aim precisely. Furthermore, the satchel charges feel like they've been toned down from the original game, and since Gordon doesn't throw them very far, they feel mostly useless. The crowbar often also feels odd to use, and its swing animations don't really help that much. The enemies themselves are varied and have different strategies and dangers associated with them. The Zen aliens are honestly the most fun to fight, although I found the short charge time on the Vortigaunt's lightning attacks a bit frustrating when you're ambushed by 3 or 4 at a time. It becomes quite tough to avoid taking damage while fighting them. Likewise, the soldiers are completely ruthless and at times feel cheap, and I often felt like this was another area where playtesting would have benefited the balance. It's almost impossible to sneak up on the soldiers, so stealth is mostly out in this game. They've also got laser vision focus and can hit you at large distances with the MP5. The same MP5 you carry that feels weak and inaccurate at long ranges. This can become frustrating on hard mode especially, where you'll often enter fights with diminished health and little to no shields. It felt like most of those fights required several reloads so that I could memorize the enemy locations and come up with a play-by-play for beating them. And I felt like it takes away a sort of organic element that otherwise would make the combat very satisfying. Still, and I know it sounds like I'm beating up on the combat, it can be very invigorating, and surviving these difficult fights on your first try can be very satisfying. As I've previously mentioned, the level design is fairly amazing. There is so much detail present in the maps that really make Black Mesa a believable place. Most of the areas have been fleshed out in some way to give the facility even more of a sprawling feeling than the original, while a few areas have been truncated or omitted entirely to alleviate confusion and pacing issues. The level of detail is great, but at times it can block the player's movement during intense combat, resulting in sustained damage when you are simply trying to duck out of harm's way. It could also prove daunting for players who have not played the original because objectives or puzzle solutions are not always immediately clear. You won't have a floating marker objective telling you at any point in this game where you need to go or what to do next, and if you don't pay attention, you can miss out on important dialogue that can, at best, keep you from understanding the story, and at worst, keep you from knowing what to do next. The level blast pit is a good example of this, where some unlit displays on a computer console are your only clues as to your next objective. There were also times when the level geometry obstructed the path of my shots during combat where logically they should not. For instance, while hiding behind a rock on surface tension, I inched around to try and return fire on some soldiers only for my bullets to magically deflect against an invisible hitbox. These instances aren't as rare as one might hope for, and you will definitely notice them. The sound effects and music is one area where the game is nearly perfect. The weapon sounds are all very satisfying, from the thump of the crossbow to the churn of the glue-on gun and every weapon in between. The environments are brought to life with wailing klaxons, buzzing servers, and groaning beams within the walls that make you feel like the facility is a real and dangerous place. Joel Nielsen does a fantastic job with the score, and it feels very in line with the Half-Life universe. I would even say it surpasses the original game, and if you compare the two, I don't think you'll have much trouble siding with me. My only two gripes are that the music doesn't always match up with what's going on, and it can be too loud. That said, I actually wish there was more of it, but it is true to the Half-Life series where music is used sparingly. The negative side to the audio is the voice acting. At best, you get almost spot-on recreations of characters like Barney, where I almost believe they had brought on Mike Shapiro to do the voices. On the flip side, you have the soldiers, who are apparently intentionally made to sound bad. I don't know what kind of design choice this was, but it is very distracting. The scientists are hit or miss. Often, though, I was willing to give most of this a pass because I expected the least amount of the voice work from an amateur nod. If it sounds like I've reviewed this game on the merits of a full-fledged studio production, I'll admit that it's hard not to. With so much hype surrounding the mod's release, expectations were high coming into it. Furthermore, upon playing it, most of the production values were so high that I often forgot I was playing a mod created in people's free time without a big studio or producer funneling cash into the project. I guess this says a lot about it. It's well-rounded, has a high degree of polish, and most importantly, it's fun. You won't make it through without your fair share of frustrations and irritations, but for the low price of free, it's pretty hard to beat a product like this. For anybody who was a fan of the original, I highly recommend it. While some of my favorite set pieces are missing, like the soldier throwing a satchel charge into a hatch that you're crawling through in the level surface tension, most of the game is there, in spirit and updated to be even better. For fans new to the series or who have only played the sequel, I fear you might have a harder time getting into it. The slow pacing at the beginning can lead to boredom, and it's quite some time before you even find your first weapon. But you should push through and appreciate it for how it deviates from so many modern blockbuster titles to set an appropriate mood and atmosphere and ease you into things. With an 8-year gestation period and coming 14 years after the original, it surprisingly can hold up to modern scrutiny, and I don't think anybody should miss this one.